Jonathan Keeble reads from Double Cross, The True Story of the D-Day Spies by Ben Macintyre. By 1940, Britain was in a state of deep anxiety as the German army rampaged across Europe, and they had spies all over Britain. So MI5 recruited a group already signed up to work for the Germans, but who wanted to spy for the British. They included a Polish patriot, a Peruvian gambling girl, a French dog lover, a Serbian playboy, and a Spanish chicken farmer. Their mission? To feed Hitler a wealth of false information in the run-up to D-Day.
On the 2nd of January 1941, the 20, or Double Cross Committee, was formed by MI5. John Masterman, an Oxford history don, part-time detective novelist and sportsman, was appointed chairman. Masterman organised the Double Cross Committee with a particular sort of club in mind, a cricket club. "Running a team of double agents is very like running a club cricket side," he wrote. And he approached the task exactly as if he was assembling a thoroughly well-trained and trustworthy team of cricketers. He thought of espionage in terms of stumpings, no-balls, innings and over-rates, and of spies as players, some of whom required a good deal of net practice before they were really fit to play in a match. A counter-espionage section of MI5, known as B1A, was now formed. This section would be responsible for the day-to-day running of the double agents, under the supervision of the Double Cross Committee. At the helm was Thomas Argyle Robertson, usually known as Tar on account of his initials. Tar was cheery and amiable, and had a natural talent for hanging around in pubs and picking up gossip. The D-Day spies recruited by the Double Cross Committee were one of the oddest military units ever assembled. Their tales begin before the outbreak of war, but then overlap, interconnect, and finally interlock on D-Day. Roman Czerniawski was a Polish patriot and fighter pilot who lived for Poland and was perfectly prepared, at times almost anxious, to die for it. In September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, Czerniawski made his way to the unoccupied south of France, where he made contact with the Polish Secret Service and obtained formal approval for his plan to establish a network in the occupied zone. He rented a room and set about constructing an entire espionage network, working for the Allies. Roman gathered, collated, typed and dispatched intelligence material to London. Gradually, the network expanded to include railway workers, police, fishermen, criminals and housewives. They sent whatever intelligence they had gathered to one of numerous post boxes across Paris, the lavatory attendant at La Palette, the Berlitz language school, and a concierge en Rue Lamarck. Czerniawski's aim was to build up a complete picture of German forces in occupied France, troop positions and movements, ammunition dumps, aerodromes, naval and radar installations. He typed up the condensed reports on tissue paper, and every one ended up with MI6, Britain's foreign intelligence organization, more formally known as the Secret Intelligence Service, or SIS. Elvira Concepcion Josefina de la Fuente Chodua spent night after night at the gaming tables in Mayfair, and though she sometimes won, she always lost in the end. When Elvira wasn't gambling, she was bored to death. She did a little translating for the BBC and found it dreary. She complained to anyone who would listen that she could not get an interesting job because she was Peruvian. One of those who happened to be listening one night was an RAF officer who passed her name on to someone in MI6. And so it was that Elvira Chodua found herself, at the age of 29, in the grill room of the Connaught Hotel, sitting across the table from a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit who introduced himself as Mr. Macefield. His real name was Lieutenant Colonel Danzy, Assistant Chief of MI6. Danzy offered her a job. Her Peruvian passport, he explained, meant that she could travel with comparative ease in occupied Europe. She could report on political matters, but more importantly, she might get herself recruited as an agent by the Germans. Elvira did not hesitate. She was bright and resourceful, and with a cast-iron cover. A good-time girl with no interests beyond the next cocktail, the next bed partner, and the next bet. In a flat in Knightsbridge, Elvira was taught how to use secret ink, using a match head impregnated with a chemical powder. Once in France, she would write apparently innocuous letters to a cover address in Lisbon. Elvira was a swift learner, and soon she was told to be ready to go to France. Major Emil Kleemann of the German Abwehr was having a most agreeable war. Occupied Paris was an exceptionally pleasant place to be, if you happened to be one of the occupiers. On the 13th of October 1941, Kleemann reluctantly arranged to meet a potential recruit, a 29-year-old Frenchwoman of Russian origin. Her name was Lily Sergeyev. The young woman waiting at the corner table was handsome without being beautiful. She had curly brown hair, bright blue eyes, and a square chin. In fluent German, Lily Sergeyev explained that she was a journalist and painter. She considered herself French, and she wanted to spy for Germany against the British. The young woman had brought her dog with her, a small white male terrier cross named Babs, to which she was obviously devoted. Kleemann was intrigued. He agreed to pay Lily a retainer of 3,000 francs a month. Lily was to make her way to Britain via Madrid, posing as a refugee, keen to serve the Allied cause by any means in your power. As the train pulled out from Gare d'Austerlitz, Lily wrote in her diary, "I pull up the window, make a place for Babs. I'm leaving France to try to help those who want to set her free." Dusan Dushko Popov and Johann Johnny Jebsen, as he was known, met in 1936 as students in southern Germany. Popov was 25, from Serbia. Jebsen, 2 years older, was from Hamburg. Preoccupied as they were with having fun, the friends could not entirely ignore the menacing political changes taking place around them in the Germany of the 1930s. Both men disliked Nazism intensely. By early 1940, Popov was living in Dubrovnik, where he had opened his own law firm, and was conducting affairs with at least 4 women, when he received a telegram from his old friend summoning him to Belgrade. "Need to meet you urgently." A few days later, in the bar of a hotel, Jebsen lowered his voice, looked around in a ludicrously conspiratorial manner, and confided that he had joined the Abwehr, the German military intelligence service. "Would you dine with a friend of mine?" Jebsen asked suddenly. The friend turned out to be one Major Munzinger, the most senior Abwehr officer in the Balkans. Over brandy and cigars, Munzinger made his pitch to Popov, as subtle as a sledgehammer. Popov's business was the ideal cover for travelling to Britain, where he must know many important and influential people. "We have many agents in Britain, but your connections would open many doors." Popov asked for time to think the offer over, and in the morning he accepted. But within days, Popov began to develop his own plan to work for the British. A few days later, Popov contrived to bump into John Dew, first secretary at the British Embassy in Belgrade, and told him he had been recruited by the Germans but wished to spy for the British. Dew put Popov in contact with the MI6 station chief in the Yugoslav capital. Johnny Jebsen laid out Popov's mission on behalf of German intelligence. He would travel to London under the guise of a businessman exporting raw materials from Yugoslavia to Britain. Once there, he should begin sending back information by writing letters in secret ink. Finally, Popov was handed a list of questions covering subjects as diverse as Britain's coastal defences, deployment of troops, civilian morale and politics. Popov immediately handed the questionnaire over to MI6. By November, Popov, codenamed Ivan by his German handlers, was ready to leave for London to spy on behalf of the Germans. On the 20th of December 1940, Dushko Popov was welcomed by a smiling Tar Robertson in the lobby of the Savoy Hotel. Popov made no monetary demands and seemed to want to work as a double agent for the British out of a combination of anti-Nazi conviction and a thirst for adventure. Tar was impressed. "I have a strong feeling we are onto something good." Juan Pujol Garcia had been many things in his short life. Cinema proprietor, businessman, cavalry officer, though he feared horses, and reluctant soldier. A graduate of the Royal Poultry School, Spain's most prestigious college for chicken farmers, he ran a poultry farm outside Barcelona, though he hated chickens. Pujol had no head for figures, and the business went bust. Stocky and spry, with a high forehead and warm brown eyes with a slightly mischievous tint, he looked like a fighting bantam. When the Second World War broke out, Pujol decided he wanted to spy for the British. In January 1941, the 29-year-old Catalan approached the British Embassy in Madrid with an offer to spy against the Germans. He was politely but firmly told to go away. Pujol next tried the Germans, pretending to be a keen fascist willing to spy against the British, in the hope that, once recruited, he could then betray them. The Germans told him that they were extremely busy. Finally, mostly to get him to shut up, the Germans said that if he could get to Britain via Lisbon, he would be considered for intelligence work. From that point on, he began to worm his way into German confidences, and in particular, those of Major Kuhlenthal of the Madrid Abwehr station. The German officer was efficient, paranoid, and stupendously gullible. He duly equipped Pujol with secret ink, cash, and the code name Agent Arabelle. On his arrival in Lisbon, Pujol once more contacted the British, and once more was rejected. This left him in something of a quandary, since he needed to start feeding information to the Germans as soon as possible. On the 19th of July 1941, he sent a telegram to Kuhlenthal announcing his safe arrival in Britain. But Pujol was not in Britain. He was still in Portugal. Denied the opportunity to gather real intelligence for either side, he decided to invent it, with the help of the Lisbon Public Library, second-hand books, and whatever he could glean from newsreels. Pujol had never been to Britain. His reports were full of glaring errors. He imagined that Glaswegian drinking habits must be similar to those in Spain. He wrote, "There are men here who would do anything for a liter of wine." His German controllers not only failed to spot his mistakes, but heaped praise on Agent Arabelle. For 9 months, Pujol remained in Lisbon, doing what spies, when stuck for real information, have always done. He invented what he thought his spy masters wanted to hear. He would continue to make it up, magnificently, for the rest of the war. In the winter of 1941, the Bletchley Park team decoding Abwehr wireless traffic between Madrid and Berlin made a most alarming discovery. The Germans appeared to have an agent active in Britain writing secret missives to a controller in Madrid. His code name was Agent Arabelle. The implications were potentially catastrophic. The mysterious Arabelle was in a position to contradict information supplied by the double-cross agents, in which case the duplicity of all MI5's double agents might be revealed. His fabulously drawn-out messages appeared to have been written by someone suffering from chronic verbal incontinence, and the information supplied by Arabelle was frequently, and sometimes hilariously, wrong. Arabelle reported, for example, that the people of Liverpool indulged in drunken orgies and slack morals at amusement centres. He appeared to believe that the summer heat was so intense in London that the diplomatic corps decamped en masse to Brighton for the summer months. Finally, MI6 twigged that the German agent sending the bogus messages must be Juan Pujol Garcia, the Spaniard who had repeatedly approached them in Lisbon. Tar Robertson was delighted by this inventive new addition to his team. The Catalan was smuggled out of Lisbon on a steamer to Gibraltar and then flown by military aircraft to Plymouth, arriving on the 24th of April 1942. After 2 weeks of interrogation, MI5 declared that despite his inexhaustibly fertile imagination, he was telling the truth. Pujol's wife and young son were brought out of Lisbon, and the family was reunited in a safe house at 35 Crespigny Road, Hendon, in the North London suburbs. Pujol was provided with a cover job translating for the BBC. Juan Pujol Garcia became Agent Garbo. By the summer of 1941, Dushko Popov, codenamed Agent Tricycle because of his reputation for liking three-in-a-bed adventures, had passed over to the Germans vast swathes of information, some of it true, none of it harmful, and much merely confusing. One evening, over cognac on a visit to Lisbon, Tricycle's German handler, von Karsthoff, announced that Berlin wanted Popov to go to New York and build a spy network from scratch, just as he had done in London. That way, when the Americans finally entered the war, Germany would be ready. Popov was eager to go. New York sounded like his kind of town. On a hot afternoon in August 1941, Dushko Popov boarded a plane at Portela Field in Lisbon, bound for the United States. He was carrying $70,000 in cash and a telegram, on which were 11 microdots, barely visible to the naked eye, the latest in German espionage technology. Under a powerful microscope, these tiny specks would reveal themselves to be photographs of a new set of questionnaires drawn up by von Karsthoff. Recruited to spy on the British, Popov had spied on the Germans, and now he was being sent by the Germans to spy on the Americans, with British approval. Popov's instruction from Tar Robertson was to create an American counterpart to Double Cross by building up a network of fake double agents. The mission was an unmitigated disaster. The FBI was not equipped, psychologically or practically, to run double agents. Prevented by the FBI from conducting any active espionage, Popov went on a spending binge of epic proportions. He acquired an apartment on Park Avenue, a summer house in fashionable Locust Valley on Long Island, a red Buick convertible, and a new girlfriend. By the summer of 1942, Popov and the FBI had had enough of each other. His German handler was by now mistrustful, and reintegrating him into the double-cross system would be tricky. A choice was put to him by Tar Robertson. He could either end his work for the British or go to Lisbon and rehabilitate himself with his Abwehr masters. He chose to go to Lisbon. To repurchase German confidence, Popov would have to describe information he had never obtained from people he had never met. Dushko Popov flew from New York to Lisbon on the 12th of October 1942, leaving behind a stack of bills that would follow him, unpaid, for the rest of the war. He was welcomed back to Portugal by a smiling von Karsthoff, who presented Popov with what sounded oddly like a school report. His work in England had been very good. In America it had been initially excellent, and then, for the last 3 months, terribly bad. Popov responded by delivering a furious broadside against the Abwehr for sending him to the US, under-supported and underfunded. It was a bravura performance. 3 days later, London intercepted a message sent by von Karsthoff to Berlin, in which he reported that Popov had been subjected to severe interrogation, and no evidence had been found that he was engaging in double work. Popov spent a week in Lisbon arguing over money, until a deal was finally struck. The Germans would pay him a monthly salary. On his return to London, Popoff began living in considerable comfort in a cottage in Knightsbridge. He paid none of his debts. He simply forwarded the bills to MI5, along with his tailor's invoice for 18 silk shirts and a dozen monogrammed handkerchiefs. Popoff was too valuable to be risked, but his demands and complaints, his restlessness and sexual shenanigans were starting to try even Tar Robertson's vast reserves of tolerance. For some time, Tar Robertson had been receiving long and detailed reports on the uses that pigeons can be put to from the point of view of espionage. The author was Flight Lieutenant Richard Melville Walker, who headed one of the most secret and peculiar units of MI5, the Pigeon Service Special Section, B3C. Flight Lieutenant Walker adored pigeons. He lived for pigeons. His reports were long, cooing poems of love. "Years of breeding have made the carrier pigeon into a thoroughbred," he told Tar. These birds remained an important way of passing information across enemy lines, fast, reliable, and virtually impossible to intercept. Flight Lieutenant Walker began to develop ever more elaborate ways for pigeons to carry secret messages. Small holes burnt with a fine nail in the feathers, a tiny roll of rice paper inserted into the hollow part of the main wing feather, messages in Morse code written on the quills in waterproof ink. In 1942, Roman Czerniawski, the Pole who had run a spy ring in occupied France for the British, agreed to spy for the Germans. On his return to London in October, he offered to spy on behalf of Poland's ally, Britain. He was interviewed by both British and Polish intelligence officers, subjected to the most exhaustive and painstaking interrogation, and praised for his great daring and initiative. "He is a natural leader of men and has great organizing ability," MI5 noted. The Abwehr radio station in Paris had been trying for weeks to make wireless contact with him, so it was decided that Czerniawski should begin sending radio messages back to his German controllers, but only on a temporary basis, under close supervision by his British case officer. Henceforth, he would be Agent Brutus. On her return from France, where she had successfully managed to get herself recruited by the Germans as an agent, the Peruvian playgirl Elvira Chodois was debriefed by MI6, which concluded her mission had been carried out to the best of her ability. On the 28th of October 1942, Elvira was officially brought into the double-cross team. She, like Garbo, would be provided with a cover job at the BBC and paid a monthly salary equal to the money she was receiving from the Germans. Under MI5 control, she should begin writing secret letters to Germany at once. All she now needed was a suitable new code name, something sophisticated, racy, and intoxicating, as befitted this beautifully manicured spy. Elvira de la Fuente Chodois became Agent Bronx, after a cocktail called the Bronx Martini. The little Spanish gentleman who had moved into number 35 Crespini Road, Hendon, was a refugee from Franco's Spain, it was said, who did translation work at the BBC. Every morning, Senor Pujol, codename Garbo, caught the underground train into central London. The only interesting thing about the new arrivals was the state of their marriage. Their nightly rows in loud and incomprehensible Spanish were a source of considerable entertainment. The neighbours would have been surprised to discover that the Pujols were arguing over the finer points of espionage. They would have been even more astonished to learn that instead of working at the BBC, the little Spanish man spent his days in a small office in Jermyn Street, making up an army of fake spies, devising stratagems, cooking up new chicken feed, and composing messages. By the end of the year, the Garbo fictional network included an airline employee, a wealthy Venezuelan student named Carlos, living in Glasgow, and a Gibraltarian waiter in Chislehurst, whose anti-British feelings were said to be exacerbated because he found the climate in Kent very disagreeable. The personality, activities, and messages of each spy were carefully imagined, refined, and entered in a logbook. The information they theoretically supplied was written up in secret ink and dispatched inside innocuous letters that the Germans believed were brought by courier or sent by airmail to various cover addresses in neutral Spain and Portugal. In fact, they were transported in the diplomatic bag. The early objective of the Garbo network was to swamp the Germans with information, misinformation, and problems. When Garbo did send important real information, this was carefully timed to arrive too late to be of use. In German eyes, Garbo's failure to supply high-grade information in a timely way was not his fault, but theirs, and the more often he tried and failed, the more they loved him. As Brutus and Bronx joined the team, and Garbo and Tricycle spun their webs tighter, it dawned on Tar Robertson that he had built a form of weaponry that could inflict some major damage. In each case, the German spy handlers were being handled unknowingly by the spies in Britain. After months of passing over chicken feed, true but harmless, there was now an opportunity to distribute information that was potentially highly destructive. From the summer of 1942, the 20 Committee began trying to influence overall German strategy in a way that could cause the Germans massive and perhaps critical damage. The initial test came with Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa in November 1942. A deception plan was drawn up, aimed at misleading the Germans into thinking the Allies intended to attack northern France and Norway. Garbo and his fictional agents reported troops massing in Scotland, apparently poised to attack Norway, and preparations for a fictional cross-channel assault. The Germans were wholly unprepared when Allied forces landed at Casablanca, Algiers, and Oran instead. Here was an exhilarating foretaste of what the spies might be able to achieve in the future. At 10:30 on the morning of the 17th of July, 1943, Kenneth Benton's secretary rang through to say that there was someone in the embassy reception demanding an urgent interview to sort out a visa. Moments later, a rather attractive woman of about 30 was ushered into his office, carrying a small white dog. "My name is Benton," said Benton. "If what I understood is correct, you wish to go to England to rejoin your family?"
"Not exactly," said the young woman. "I'm going there to spy."
In good English, Lily Sergeyev described her recruitment in Paris by Major Emil Kleemann of German military intelligence, her training in the use of a wireless and secret ink, and her spying mission to Britain. She now wished to swap sides. That afternoon, Benton sent a coded telegram to London, describing his meeting with Lily Sergeyev and asking whether MI5 might have any use for her. The person assigned to investigate Lily Sergeyev was Mary Shearer, the only woman case officer in Section B1A of MI5. Mary Shearer was 29, robust, ambitious, and with a sharp sense of humour. In a male world, she assumed a carapace of toughness, smoking filterless Kent cigarettes and holding her gin as well as the next man. After conducting the background check on Lily Sergeyev, Shearer concluded, "She appears to be a character well suited to becoming a double agent." Mary gave her the code name Treasure. Lily next went to Madrid to meet her German handler, Major Kleemann, who agreed to provide her with a radio set with operating instructions written on a microdot concealed in the case. He then handed over 2 pellets of ink for secret writing and a long questionnaire clearly aimed at discovering the Allies' invasion plans, which he told her to memorize and then destroy. Kenneth Benton of MI6 was taken aback when Lily reappeared in his office with Babs in tow and declared that she would not leave without him.
"If my work is important, it is worth this exemption. To you it's just a dog, but to me it's Babs, and worth more than £1 million.
Benton, who rather liked dogs, told her he would do his best, though he knew It was going to be impossible to get that wretched dog into Britain without passing through quarantine. But Lily had heard an Englishman promise to get her dog into Britain. That misunderstanding would have the most profound ramifications. On the 7th of October, Lily Sergeyev, travelling under an alias, arrived in Gibraltar with Babs. Sure enough, the customs officer insisted she surrender the dog, but their separation, she assured herself, would be temporary. She had Benton's promise. Lily was driven to flat 19 Rugby Mansions in Kensington and introduced to a Yugoslavian woman named Marica, who would be her housekeeper, Mary Shearer explained. She did not explain that the flat was an MI5 safe house under surveillance. The phone was bugged, the post monitored, and Marica Mihailovich was herself a double agent. Lily glumly appraised her new home, the flat with its large, ill-furnished rooms.
Clean and impersonal, like the rooms of a hotel.
The street was
bleak and gloomy,
and London was grey, damp and foggy. Lowering her spirits still further was the nagging and growing pain in her kidneys, a recurrence of an old malady. Lily missed Paris, stylish even under Nazi occupation. But most of all, she missed Babs. The D-Day deception plan was eventually named Operation Bodyguard. Its aim was to make the Germans believe there were no plans for landings in Normandy. A vast secret army set to work fabricating physical deception, including dummy landing craft and rubber tanks at key points, and technical deception in the form of great waves of radio traffic, a blizzard of electric noise mimicking great armies training and assembling where none existed. British diplomats dropped misleading hints at cocktail parties to be overheard by eavesdroppers and channeled back to Germany. Conspicuously large orders were made for Michelin Map 51, a map of the Pas de Calais area. Tar Robertson's tiny team of double agents, telling lies to their spy masters in secret writing, by radio, and to their faces, were forging a shield of deceit that would guard the soldiers, if it worked, onto the beaches of Normandy. The idea was born of creating an entire fictional army in southeast England, poised to invade the northeast coast of France. This ghost army, supposedly stationed directly across the channel from the Pas de Calais, was dubbed the First United States Army Group. Another fake force, the British Fourth Army, would be created in Scotland to keep German minds focused on a threat to Norway. These counterfeit armies would threaten bogus targets, while real soldiers prepared to attack the real target in Normandy. By the end of 1943, the double-cross team was far more powerful and better equipped than it had ever been before. As 1944 dawned and D-Day approached, Joan Pujol was in the highest spirits. He was beloved of both the British and German intelligence services, and he had a new girlfriend. Somewhat ungallantly, he described her to his German handlers as less than beautiful, but delightfully indiscreet, which was ideal since she worked as a secretary in the War Office and had access to useful information on the forthcoming invasion. She was also imaginary. The Garbo network now consisted of a staggering 24 agents, of whom only one, Pujol himself, was real. Over the next 6 months, Garbo's network would send an average of 4 wireless messages a day. The Germans began submitting wish lists of secrets, the dates and targets of the invasion, the troops involved, types of landing craft, warships and embarkation points. He was specifically asked to inspect the coast between Weymouth and Southampton, where troops were already massing for the Normandy invasion. "There is no concentration of troops at special points," he reported. Elvira Chodor, Agent Bronx, was also wheedling her way deeper into German affections, by rather different methods. Her early letters contain snippets of political and economic gossip, supposedly gleaned from the military officers, politicians, society ladies, industrialists and journalists she encountered around the gaming tables of fashionable London. From late 1943, she began to make her letters more military in character, to enable her to play a part in current deception policy. She was bombarded with questions from Germany about military installations and troop movements. She passed on harmless information about egg rationing, but also deceptive material to suggest that the vast, slowly assembling US army was plagued by logistical problems. The Germans were pleased.
Good work. Good reward. Information wanted. Movement of troops in Scotland and southern England. Details of preparations for European landing.
A gambling party girl was being transformed, in German eyes, into an important agent with access to top-grade military information. In February 1944, a letter arrived at Elvira's flat, written in secret ink, suggesting that if she uncovered invasion information, she should send a message to the bank in Lisbon to indicate where and when the attack would take place. The warning should be in a plain language code, a message that looks perfectly innocuous to the uninitiated. Here was a prime opportunity to plug Bronx into the heart of the D-Day deception. Elvira sent back a letter suggesting that if she wrote that she needed the money pour mon dentiste, that would mean the information was certain. If she wrote pour mon docteur, it was almost certain. But if the words used were pour mon médecin, it was only probable. She also added a timescale. Tout de suite meant the landing would be in 1 week's time. Urgent indicated an attack in a fortnight. Vite would indicate a month. Here was a simple, swift and effective way of sending the Germans barking up the wrong tree, neatly disguised as a medical bill. The London winter wrapped around Lily Sergeyev like a soggy cloak. Her kidneys ached. She spent long hours alone in the Rugby Mansion's flat. Every few days, Mary Shearer would march in with her attaché case, a model of brisk efficiency. Together they would draft and redraft letters for Major Kleeman, cover letters to the address in Lisbon containing idle chat with messages beneath in secret ink. She visited her relatives near Bristol. Forces for the Normandy landings were already assembling in the area, but Lily described lonely countryside and empty main roads. Lily repeatedly demanded to be reunited with Babs, but the response was always non-committal and evasive. In December, Lily was seized with a fit of shivering and trembling. Delirious, she was rushed to St. Mary's Hospital and diagnosed with chronic kidney stones. Tar Robertson arrived the next day carrying a bunch of daffodils. Robertson, usually so affable and cheery, struck Lily as oddly ill at ease. When she recovered, she raised the matter of her dog with Tar Robertson. He changed the subject. Lily's sister, Bimbo, was living in Algiers. She would write and ask her to find out what had happened to Babs. One evening, Lily returned to the flat to find a letter waiting from her sister, postmarked Algiers. She read the first sentence over and over in stunned disbelief.
My poor darling, I hate the pain I will give you, but it's better you should know. You will not see your Babs again. He has been run over.
Her dog, probably the only thing she had ever truly loved, the only creature to have shown her unconditional love, was dead. Lily was distraught.
I am alone. Absolutely alone.
After the grief came boiling anger. Lily believed fervently and furiously that Babs had been sacrificed by MI5, his death arranged as a convenient solution to a tiresome problem. And she may have been right. The fate of Babs the dog is a mystery. Between the 25th of November and the 29th of December 1943, 9 separate items were entered in the MI5 treasure file relating to Babs. every single one has been taken from the file and destroyed. Mary Shearer was surprised how well, after her initial distress, Lily took the news of Babs's death. Had she read Lily's diaries, Mary would have formed a rather different impression. Lily was a born actress.
"I can change my skin quite easily now," she wrote.
Agent Treasure was in deep mourning for Babs and quietly plotting revenge. Roman Chernyavsky, codenamed Brutus, began implementing the bogus threat to Norway. Chopin, his imaginary wireless operator, sent a message reporting that he was heading north for a Polish military conference. Agent Brutus provided the Germans with the insignia and location of the 4th Army headquarters in Edinburgh, described large bodies of troops in Stirling and Dundee, and offered evidence that American and Norwegian forces were also gathering. Freak, Popoff's radio operator, invented a talkative American naval officer who revealed he would shortly be joining the 4th Army. The Germans were pleased. "Your latest fires very satisfactory. Congratulations." The D-Day spies swung into action. By mid-February 1944, Garbo had invented a team of Welsh fascists who were deployed all along the south coast, and Pujol was commended by Germany for the amplification of your network. The Welsh spies, in particular, were giving the best results. Garbo sent himself on a notional tour of the south coast. He reported seeing American soldiers, but predicted the invasion would not happen for a long time, and certainly not until an assault force immeasurably greater in number than that which exists has been assembled. Dushko Popov, Agent Tricycle, gathered intelligence of a quality, complexity, and duplicity greater than anything he had supplied before. He made his own tour of the Kent coast and reported that preparations for a great armada were plainly underway, but incomplete. Dover Harbour was being overhauled to accommodate a huge task force, he reported, but again, a lot of work still had to be done. While Agent Brutus focused on the north and Garbo and Tricycle worked on the southern deception, Bronx looked west. Elvira's reports were now graded very important and distributed to both the operational sections of the Abwehr and Army Intelligence HQ in Berlin. The Germans had substantial forces deployed in the Bordeaux area of southwest France, and once the invasion was underway, its tanks would certainly be deployed north to try to repel the Allies. Every hour the panzers could be detained in the southwest would help, so a new and equally fictitious threat would be aimed at the Bordeaux area from the western ports of Britain. This was Operation Ironside. Elvira would implement Operation Ironside almost single-handed. No small feat for an agent once dismissed as a good-time girl with no allegiance to anyone except herself. Timing was critical. In order to achieve our object of containing the German Panzer Division in the region of Bordeaux, it will be necessary to time the telegram to arrive 2 days before D-Day. To reach the Germans in time, the message would have to be sent on or before the 29th of May. The telegram would indicate to the Germans that an attack will definitely be made against the Bay of Biscay, to be followed by a letter in secret ink once the invasion was underway, providing a get-out for Bronx by explaining how she had made a mistake. Mary Shearer drew up a bold plan. Agent Treasure, Lily Sergeyev, was to go to Lisbon and meet her German handler, Major Kleeman, and get him to hand over a radio. Treasure landed in Lisbon on the 1st of March 1944. In an empty flat, Kleeman gave her a parcel. Inside was a shabby wooden case containing a transmitter. "Here are the 2 holes to which you connect your tapper. It's the only outward sign that could arouse suspicions," said Kleeman. A wireless expert would show Lily how to make a Morse code tapper. But first, Kleeman declared brightly, "Some sightseeing, and then lunch." A few hours later, Lily stood on the ramparts of the Castelo dos Muros, the great Moorish fort. Lily had brought with her a small Zeiss camera, and as they toured the castle, she said,
"What about a picture? It would be a souvenir."
"What a good idea," said Kleeman, never suspecting that the camera had been supplied by MI5 for the express purpose of obtaining his picture for their files. Lily snapped Kleeman as he clambered up through one of the castle turrets. Kleeman ordered lunch at a small restaurant.
"Do you think there is going to be an Allied invasion?"
Lily recalled what Tar had said.
"Yes."
Kleeman frowned, and then launched into a prepared speech.
"Now, listen to me carefully, Lily. The next big move in the war will be the Allied landing. Our only chance of winning at the moment is to throw them back into the sea. To do that, we must know in advance where they are planning to land."
She should spend as much time as possible visiting her relatives in the West Country, paying particular attention to any military activity on Salisbury Plain, and reporting everything seen in or around Bristol. When her radio was working, she should transmit on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 11 p.m. There was one more important piece of business. Now that she had a wireless, Lily would need a control signal, a way to indicate that she was now transmitting under British control, should she be caught. Lily suggested a subtle danger code.
"At the beginning of the message, between KA and the call sign, there is a dash. Sometimes I do it, sometimes not. If I do it twice, once in the message and once in the repetition of the message, it'll mean I'm no longer a free agent. But only if the dash is there both times. If it's only in once, it doesn't mean anything. If they comb through a series of my messages, they will see that it varies and won't pay any attention when I repeat it."
Kleeman was impressed.
"That is excellent."
In his notebook he wrote, "Dash between the beginning and number." In her diary, Lily wrote,
5 months ago I was so full of enthusiasm, so ready to love the British, so eager to help them. I took risks on their behalf. In return, I only asked for one thing: to keep my dog. It wasn't asking much, but it was too much for them. Tomorrow I'll be in London. I'll hand them over everything, except for a dash. A dash that will enable me to destroy all my work, all their work, the minute I want to."
On the 13th of April, Mary took Lily to Hampstead Heath, to a house with a royal blue front door. The little radio transmitter had been set up in a top-floor bedroom. At 12 minutes past midnight, Lily sent a message to Kleeman.
"Arrive safely."
She did not insert a dash, either in the message or its repetition. Over the next 2 months, whenever she tapped out a message, she thought about the dash.
"Every time I know that I can destroy the work of 3 years. This is my revenge. They made me a promise, and they didn't keep it. Now I shall have them in my power."
As Major Kleeman had instructed, Lily Sergeyev headed to Bristol to stay with her relatives and toured the south coast by bicycle, while actually never leaving London.
"I make imaginary visits to places which I did not know existed, and from which I bring back rich harvests of information," she wrote in her diary. "In this world of fiction, I spend my time in trains, clubs, messes, canteens. I transmit a hodgepodge of descriptions of badges, vehicles, tanks, planes, and airfields, garnished with conversations overheard, from which the Germans cannot fail to derive the correct conclusions."
Like many spies caught up in the make-believe, she began to wonder who she really was.
"For 3 years I have been acting a part. If I survive the war, will I be able to readapt?"
On the 17th of April, Johnny Jebsen was captured by the Gestapo. They suspected him both of illegal financial dealings and, more seriously, of being a traitor. Jebsen, codename Artist, German double agent and Dushko Popov's friend from boyhood, had recruited Popov to the German intelligence service, and in turn had been recruited by Popov to work for the British. Jebsen's disappearance sent a bolt of pure horror through the double-cross team. The dreadful news arrived in a single line from Lisbon. Artist has disappeared since the afternoon of the 29th of the 4th, and investigations have been instituted. If Jebsen's captors considered him untrustworthy, they might well suspect Popov, his best friend and agent, and if Popov was identified as a double agent, that would inevitably cast suspicion on the other controlled agents in the UK. But worse than that, Jebsen knew the entire Garbo network was fiction, feeding false information in huge quantity back to Berlin. If Jebsen revealed this to his captors, the Germans would re-examine all the information received from their agents and look for the patterns of disinformation, and Operation Fortitude would be blown, with incalculable consequences. The double-cross team would have set the scene for a bloodbath on the beaches of Normandy. The race was now on to put as much of the deception in place as possible before D-Day, and pray that Jebsen did not crack too soon. Piece by piece, the double agents dropped the jigsaw into the hands of the enemy. Roman Chernyavsky, Agent Brutus, reported the 4th U.S. Armoured Division in Bury St. Edmunds. One of Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbo's Welsh Aryans, saw the 6th Armoured Division in Ipswich, while another spotted the 28th Infantry Division in Kent. Popov waited anxiously for news of Jebsen and distracted himself in the usual way. When MI5 found out that women of the Auxiliary Territorial Service were being introduced to the clockhouse for immoral purposes and that there might be security interest involved, Popov was told sharply to stop drawing attention to himself in this manner. Jebsen had often hinted to his British handlers that he was involved in shady business deals. Jebsen was nothing if not bold in his financial corruptions. He had contrived to diddle senior officers in each of the 3 most brutal elements of the Third Reich, the Gestapo, the SS, and the SD, and they were out for his blood. By 1944, the extraction of confessions had been refined to a vicious art. The Gestapo torturers were masters of the electrode and rubber nightstick, the genital vice, the soldering iron and the ice-cold bath, in which prisoners were thrust to the point of drowning. Gestapo interrogation records were destroyed before the end of the war. The only evidence of what happened to Jebsen comes from a handful of witnesses, post-war interviews, and the testimony of other prisoners. An Abwehr officer in Madrid was summoned to Berlin to discuss the interrogation of Jebsen, and returned, according to colleagues, in a highly nervous condition, and mentioned something about the unpleasantness of having one's fingernails torn off. Johnny Jebsen could have revealed that Popov was a double agent, and that every German spy in Britain was either turned or invented, enough to scupper the looming invasion and change the course of the war. But by the 20th of May, with less than 3 weeks to go until D-Day, he had told them nothing at all. On the 17th of May, Mary Shearer, case officer with MI5, took Lily Sergeyev, Agent Treasure, to see Gone with the Wind in the West End. Both women wept copiously during the film and emerged red-eyed and in high spirits. They linked arms as they walked home. In her diary, Lily wrote, "Mary crying at the cinema. Is she human after all?" The next morning, as they were preparing a wireless message, Lily leaned over with a conspiratorial air and observed that if she should die, Mary should not try to work the transmitter without her. Mary, suddenly alert, asked her what exactly she meant by that remark. Lily, realizing she had revealed too much, was defensive. "I didn't mean to warn you. I'm not concerned about what happens to your people. I don't owe them anything. I trusted them." With horror, Mary understood that this was not a warning but a thinly veiled threat. Lily must have been given a control signal by her German handlers after all. Otherwise, why should they not run the transmitter without her? She demanded that Lily describe her control signal and reveal whether she had used it. Lily refused on both counts.
You can go through all my transmissions with a mathematical genius, but you won't find it.
Mary immediately sent a message to MI5 that was short, precise, and deeply alarming. Tar Robertson was scorchingly furious. Lily was holding Operation Fortitude to ransom over a dog. She might have alerted the enemy already, but as she refused to divulge the signal, there was no way of checking. But however fickle she might be, treasure was too enmeshed in the deception to be extracted now. The double-cross team was plunged back into a state of roiling insecurity. Since Lily was working her own radio, she might yet be able to scupper the operation. On the 27th of May, Antonio Manuel de Almeida, general manager of the Banco Espírito Santo in Lisbon, received a telegram in French from one of the bank's London clients. It read, "Send £50 quickly. I need it for my dentist." Senor Almeida knew that this particular client was always short of money, and that any message relating to her doctor or dentist was intended for the Germans. He immediately passed the telegram to Sossen, where Elvira de la Fuente Chodwa's telegram would be interpreted not as a dental emergency, but as a warning.
I have definite news that a landing is to be made in the Bay of Biscay in 1 week.
In the first week of June, Allied armies streamed down the country lanes of southern England, like water running through numberless channels towards the coast, gathering and spreading into a wide estuary of men, weapons, tanks, and ships. Major Peter Martin led his men past ripening fields towards the coast, wondering at the unreal feeling of marching to war through this gentle, bucolic landscape. As a real army along the southern edge of England prepared for battle, another deployment, wholly bogus, was underway in 2 quite unremarkable pebble-dashed semi-detached houses in the London suburbs. Mr. and Mrs. Roman Chernyavsky had recently moved into 61 Richmond Park Road, Barnes. From here, Agent Brutus sketched out the contours of the fake army. On the other side of London, at 35 Crespigny Road in Hendon, Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbo, added the shading and colours. From Scotland came reports of major naval exercises in Loch Fyne, soldiers seen wearing Arctic uniforms, and troops assembling in East Coast ports, preparing for an assault on Norway. Pujol himself described troops assembling in East Sussex. Shortly before midnight, on the eve of D-Day, in deep blackout, a peculiar little procession entered the house at 35 Crespigny Road. Leading the way was Juan Pujol, followed by Tar Robertson and Sergeant Charles Haynes, the former bank clerk who operated Garbo's wireless. All wore civilian clothes. Earlier in the evening, they had enjoyed dinner in Mayfair. Refreshed, eager, and extremely tense, this oddly assorted group was about to commit what was, on the surface, an act of astounding treachery, by tipping off the Germans to the time and place of the D-Day landings. It had been argued strenuously that in order to maintain Garbo's standing with the Germans, Pujol must be allowed to send advance warning of the invasion, not so soon as to make any military difference, but sufficiently early that when the Allies duly landed in Normandy, Pujol would be able to say he had told them so. After some hesitation, General Eisenhower had agreed that the double-cross team could alert the Germans no more than 3.5 hours before the first troops landed at 6:30 a.m. The delay in transmission from Madrid to Berlin was about 3 hours, so by the time the German High Command got the message, the invasion should be underway. Pujol had asked his German handler to ensure that the wireless operator in Spain was waiting to receive a message at 3 a.m. Just before 3 a.m., with Allied paratroopers already in action in France, the men gathered around the wireless in the upstairs bedroom, and Haynes prepared to send the message. The story, as befitted the occasion, was a dramatic one, although buried, as usual, in Pujol's nomadic circumlocutions. Fred, the Gibraltarian waiter, had linked up with 2 American deserters from Hiltingbury camp and gone AWOL in order to bring Garbo the news that the invasion had started. At 2:59 a.m., Tarr told Haines, "All right, Sergeant, let them have it." Haines keyed in the call sign. The only response was a crackle of static.
"Oh, I don't get it," said Haines. "Normally Fritzy answers right away."
He repeated the call after 15 minutes. Again, there was no reply. The radio operator had either left his post or fallen asleep. Finally, at 8 a.m., the Madrid wireless operator either woke up or came into work, and the message was picked up and acknowledged, by which time the Allies were under heavy fire from the Germans on Normandy's Juno beach. So, far from being an anticlimax, Garbo's carefully timed non-warning had achieved its purpose. He had passed over what must be seen in German eyes as the most important intelligence tip-off of the war, and they had missed it. Like the Madrid radio operator, the Germans had been caught napping. The invasion of Normandy came as a stunning surprise to the senior German commanders, who were not only unprepared but positively relaxed. Rommel, in charge of improving the Channel defences, was 500 miles away at home, celebrating his wife's birthday. Hans von Salmuth, of the 15th Army, defending the Calais area, was on a hunting expedition. The intelligence chief, Colonel Georg Hansen, was taking the waters at Baden-Baden. The German Navy, having reported that an invasion was improbable owing to the poor weather, cancelled patrols in the Channel, and the troops in their dugouts and bunkers were told to get some rest. Hitler had stayed up late on the 5th of June, discussing films with Eva Braun and Goebbels. On D-Day, he slept in until 10 o'clock. When finally told the invasion had begun, he was cheerful, convinced the attack would be repelled with ease. The Germans might have been taken by surprise, but they were far from defenceless. The coastline bristled with field and coastal batteries, mortars, machine guns and snipers, barbed wire, wooden stakes, mines, anti-tank hedgehogs made from welded steel girders, concrete pyramid-shaped dragon's teeth to slow down and channel tanks into killing zones, and more than 1 million upright stakes in the fields beyond, known as Rommel's asparagus, to impede airborne landings. From bunkers, machine gun nests, trenches and gun emplacements, the German defenders poured fire onto the attackers. News of the landings was brought back to Britain by Gustav, an RAF homing pigeon released by a Reuters war correspondent. Flying through 30-mile-per-hour headwinds, dense cloud and sporadic enemy fire, the pigeon completed the journey to his home loft near Portsmouth in just 5 hours 16 minutes, a D-Day record. The message was relayed to London. It said, "We are just 20 miles or so off the beaches. First assault troops landed 0750, steaming steadily in formation. Lightnings, typhoons, fortresses crossing since 0545. No enemy aircraft seen." By the end of the first day of the invasion, the Allies had suffered at least 10,000 casualties and 2,500 dead. But 156,000 men had landed in France from the sea, and 23,000 from the air, thrusting a spear point into occupied France. D-Day was the reason for the double-cross system, the grand finale to which every preceding deception was a foretaste. The soldiers who fought that day have become lasting symbols of courage and skill. But while they battled their way up the bloody dunes, an unseen force fought alongside them from many miles away, not with guns, bullets and bombs, but with subterfuge and stealth, to whittle away German strength and confidence, to confuse, surprise and mislead, and shield the invaders with lies. If the double-cross deception had backfired, if Johnny Jebsen had cracked, if Lily Sergeyev had inserted her control signal, if the great defensive net of lies had unravelled and the Germans had been ready and waiting in Normandy, reinforced and alert, then the invasion would have failed. The most important tribute to the deception's success came from the Germans themselves. On the 29th of July, nearly 2 months after D-Day, Garbo received a wireless message. "With great happiness and satisfaction, I am able to advise you today that the Führer has awarded the Iron Cross to you for your extraordinary merits, a decoration which is granted only to frontline combatants. For that reason, we all send you our most sincere and cordial congratulations." In reply, Garbo professed to be so overcome with pride and emotion that he was lost for words. "I cannot at this moment, when emotion overcomes me, express in words my gratitude for the decoration conceded by our Führer, to whom humbly and with every respect I express my gratitude for the high distinction which he has bestowed on me. Furthermore, I must state that this prize has been won not only by me, but also by the other comrades who have made possible my work here." Garbo was right to see the award as a collective honour. He had not mounted the deception alone. His comrades included the agents he had invented, the other agents and their own inventions, and behind them the men and women who built the system, the case officers, spy masters, and inspired dissemblers who imagined the double-cross project, and the far-sighted planners who, amazingly, let them get on with it. Those who fought on the battlefront of D-Day never knew that a Polish patriot, a Peruvian gambling girl, a French dog lover, a Serbian playboy, and a Spanish chicken farmer, together and in deepest secrecy, had lied them to victory. Agent Garbo accepted the Iron Cross on behalf of them all.
Jonathan Keeble was reading the final part of Double Cross, The True Story of the D-Day Spies by Ben Macintyre. It was abridged by Libby Spurrier, produced by Joanna Green, and was a peer production for BBC Radio 4. Well, now to take us to the shipping bulletins is Sailing By.